मैम
सर प्रीति इज ट्राइंग टू ज्वाइन, उनका ये कह रहा है वेटिंग फॉर द होस्ट टू स्टार्ट। आप उनको लेट इन कर सकते हैं? हेलो।
यस यस मैम, आई कैन हियर यू। नो आई मैं देख नहीं पा रहा मैम उनको।
आप नहीं देख पा रहे? उन्होंने सेम लिंक क्लिक करी है।
हाँ जी मैम, सेम लिंक ही ओपन किया है मैंने, और अटेंडेंस में भी नहीं है मैम वो, और ना ही पैनलिस्ट में। आई
हाँ,
थिंक।
वो वेट कर रहे हैं, उनके लिए उनको ये मैसेज दिखा रहा है कि वेटिंग फॉर द वेबिनार टू स्टार्ट।
ओके ओके ओके। नहीं, मैंने अपने
वेटिंग फॉर द
ऐसे
होस्ट टू।
वेबिनार स्टार्ट ऑलरेडी कर दिया मैम।
अच्छा अच्छा, ठीक है, मैं उनको दोबारा बोलती हूँ। सर आप एक लिंक प्रीति को फॉरवर्ड कर सकते हैं?
यस मैम, श्योर श्योर, आई विल डू
थैंक
दैट।
यू। Sorry about this, everyone. We're just trying to sort a glitch. What is a webinar in which there are no glitches? This is our first one. I think we've done well so far.
No worries, no worries.
सर आपने लिंक भेज दी प्रीति जी को?
नो मैम, वी आर I'm working on it ना, just give me a 2 minutes.
Okay,
I
now
will
I'm
just
here.
send.
Okay. No, I'm not here. I'm in another room. It's We've managed to find Preeti.
Yeah, Preeti came. Preeti came. She came.
Preeti's here. Okay. The day has been saved. The Avengers have arrived.
You'll have to make
Yes.
me a host or something because I have
I
I can't turn on
Hang
my
on. I am going. Yeah, you're co-host now. You should be able to do everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Gosh.
Now that we've got our Kala Tika of one technical glitch over with, I'm sure this is going to go very well. Over to you, Preeti.
I'm so sorry. So we have not been able to reach Khalid. So we're going to go ahead with both our panelists. So are we starting live streaming? In which case I can start.
Yeah, we are now. You can start.
Okay, all right. So after a warm welcome to all of you to the second panel for the day, Development or Injustice, Distress and Resistance in Our Cities. So in many ways, this panel includes all the issues that we at JUST are concerned about injustice and resistance. And today, we take the message from many activists and organizers around the world who refuse to normalize exploitation. And we want to do the same with cities. Cities with their sparkling malls and restaurants. Sometimes, we tend to normalize the exploitation and the exclusion of our workers and the most vulnerable among us. So in our conversation today, we want to think about urban development from a critical lens, understand who experiences the detrimental impacts of unrestricted capitalist expansion, who was excluded, and on whose backs cities are run every day. While this is important, I also want to reflect on a bad habit that sometimes social scientists have to analyze inequalities to the point of desperation and cynicism, a dangerous tool that the ruling class can use against the people itself. So instead, we want to illuminate how power works, not to be despondent about it, but to learn how to challenge it. It is critical to imagine a different world, and glimpses of that alternative can be found in some of our movements itself. So I'm really excited to hear from the panelists, both about bringing a critical lens to urban development, but also to learn about how people have resisted and try to transform those very inequalities. These are not easy transformations, but it's not impossible. In that spirit, I also wanted to express our solidarity with an ongoing No AC campaign of the Telangana Gig and Platform Workers Union, who feel compelled to drive their cars without switching on the AC in their cars, as the costs of running their vehicles is unsustainable as per the current fare structures. So with that, and in solidarity to the workers there. So today, we will see if Khalid joins us, but right now we have two of our panelists with us today. I will introduce each of the panelists as they begin to speak. They'll speak for 15 minutes each, and after the three panelists, we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. And please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A section as well. So first, I'd like to invite Tikender Panwar. Tikender is the former deputy mayor of Shimla City and the author of the book Cities in Transition. He also runs a program called City Sense in the channel NewsClick. And you will find extended conversations in that channel about some of the issues that we are discussing today. So thank you, Tikender, for joining us in spite of not being well today. So please, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so let me correct you first. I used to run because the owner of the channel is behind the bars. So that channel is not, so that channel doesn't run anymore. Anyway, but that also speaks about how our cities are being taken care of. So, Preeti, you've said we have 15 minutes each, and just give me a buzz when it's 12 minutes so that I know where I have to finish off. So you've said it's development or injustice, isn't it? So I won't buy that binary. In fact, I would like to I would like to approach from a little different lens. Instead of going into that binary, I would say development and injustice, in fact, instead of or injustice. Because does that mean that we don't want any development? We want. But the point is, the current form of development is leading to, huge amounts of injustice against our own people. But why is it so? And then the second aspect of the topic is, I think, resistance and what is it? The next part?
Distress.
Distress. So definitely there's distress that's bound to increase, and resistance is definitely going to come up. But the resistance would not be in what we have seen in a very conventional form of resistance, where this the slogan that we used to coin in early 80s, democratization of the surplus. So those forms of democratization of the surplus are definitely going to change now. So in this context, I would like to start from the basic question, actually. Who actually designs the cities? For whom are the cities built? And who are the players, who build the cities? So I don't want to go back to 6,000 years when we have the first urban developments taking place in our subcontinent from the Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. But let me start from the independence period, a little pre-independence also, because the colonial masters treated our cities as, centers where, where the then form of capitalism was supposed to be the driving force. And that's how, they shifted a good number of people from the countryside to the cities. But we know what the major purpose, and that's how they built these townships, where we had the strong demarcation between the civil and the military, but highly exclusive form of urban development, where the Indian slaves were kept. If you come to Simla, you'll come to know you have those palatial houses for the British rulers, but at the same time you'll have the Panch Ghar Ki line or the Nau Ghar Ki line, where you'll make the Indian workers to live in those small houses. And then we also see the Lutyens' Delhi, where now our current rulers live, and also the other form of Delhi that we have witnessed. But I think the overarching framework that I would like to share here is, we all know that since post-independence, there was this large flux of migrants coming from West Pakistan and East Pakistan, because at that time Bangladesh was not formed and we had East Pakistan. And a good number of urban development took place in some of the northern regions, where you had to accommodate this large number of people. And at the same time, we also find that, anything with the suffix Nagar in Delhi is actually a resettlement colony. So you have those Lajpat Nagars, your Malviya Nagars. So all those Nagars where you have a suffix, suffixing Nagars, are actually your resettlement colonies. And there is an estimate that almost 80 lakh people had migrated from both the ends, but all those who could be accommodated during the then figures that we have is not more than 5 lakh. So where did the rest go? I'm just trying to build this. Where did the rest go? So you can understand, where did the rest go? They didn't die, they lived there. But then, that's how they started occupying spaces around. That's the first thing we must understand as far as urban development is concerned. The second point that I want to make is that when we got independence, we also brought the same argument that, look, it's the Western form of urban development that we have to copy. And the impetus came from the center that, look, it will be massive industrialization, and it will be industrialized led in growth that would actually lead our urban development. So therefore, for that, we have to push millions and millions of people from the rural to the urban centers, because manufacturing was supposed to be the driving force. But at the same time, so that's the second aspect that we must understand. That's how, your modern towns came up, Rourkela, Bhilai, etc., even Chandigarh for that matter. And I almost share this funny anecdote between Chandigarh, and the new town called Gurgaon, Because when you see Chandigarh and Nangal, especially Nangal is another township where you had the National Fertilizers Limited and Bakra Dam was constructed. So during my student movement days, I've been staying in Nangal, and you won't imagine, Preeti, that the houses of the working class, the then working class, had a front yard and a backyard. Still, I live in those. Whenever I visit those places, I live with my comrades there who have a front yard and a backyard. I'm talking about the workers there. Now imagine the condition of workers that we have. The sheer precarity that has actually crept in. That's just to give you a narrative. But Chandigarh is a very interesting phenomenon. Many planners don't buy that argument, but I really actually, why I fascinate that, not that that's an ideal form of urban development to me, but the point is when Corbusier was building Chandigarh, Nehru was very critical on how do you plan the city. And he asked Corbusier that don't make it a ghost town because people have just I mean, you don't even have utensils. I mean, people who have migrated. So imagine when you're building the houses should be in such a manner where they are able to stay. So that's why when you, apart from the design typologies, or apart from the 7-vector roads that it has, apart from all the planning aesthetics that Corbusier brought in, but one aspect which normally we don't discuss nowadays is that he made it a point that no steel would be used because steel would escalate the cost. Plastering of the outer walls, that's why you'll find Chandigarh. I mean, now, of course, you have filthy wealth coming in that town. But even plastering of the outer walls was not allowed for the simple reason people would not be able to buy those houses. So that at the same time, even the downpipes, you'll not allow the downpipes to be installed because that will escalate the cost. Everything was very indigenous in the sense that everything was earthen bricks, etc., etc. So that is actually, so that's the second part of the trajectory of urban development. The third part, I think, which is also important is, if you see and now we've seen Gurgaon, I mean, that's how I bring in this comparison. I mean, what I call the privatization of the cities, where you don't have public transport, where I'm told even if there are clouds in the sky, people fear because they are going to get flooded because you've blocked all the water channels in Gurgaon. Okay. So even clouds fear people with an advancement of 50 years, 60 years, we would have gone further. But it's the sheer, maximization of the profit in this whole question of urban building that we have actually increased the precarity of the towns and the citizens. But the third element, let me just jump a little faster. The third element, I think, which is important is that if you see the urban development, because I was able to review the master plan of Delhi, the 2041, and the first 51 to, 51 onwards, if you see. So Delhi has very interesting, not that these were very inclusive, please don't take me into that, but I'm just trying to give you an overarching framework, but there were far better ways and processes. So I think it's the process and the methods in which the cities are being built. I think one of the critical elements where we have to actually ponder about. And how do we occupy those spaces, while reclaiming those spaces in the whole question of larger city makers. I think that's an important element that I want to bring to the fore. So while reviewing this Delhi master plan, 51, if you see, 51. So the master plan was printed in 4 languages, Preeti. So it was Hindi, English, Urdu, and Punjabi. And then you had people, but still your 70%, 75% of the people were illiterate. Okay, so what do you do in even if you print in 4 languages? Then there was a person not hired, but a permanent employee in the municipal corporation, because in Simla, we also had that permanent employee who was called a dhol beater. So he would beat the dhol, visit every ward and say, look, now we are preparing a master plan. Please come up with your objections. And that's how, because the driving force was, okay, industrial-led. I mean, of course, it was capitalist industrial-led development, not to miss that point. But at the same time, because they wanted workers. So you have those LIG houses, you have those economically weaker section houses, it's a different point that 70% of the houses should have been for LIG and, Janta flats. Actually, the reverse happened. It's exactly the inverse. So your middle classes and higher income groups occupied some 70% to 80%, and the LIG and the EWS. So that's a different, but that is one of the forms. Things started change. So, and the fourth point that I want to make is what was and what continues to be the role of city development. I think let's not miss the point. The role of city development is furtherance of accumulation of capital. There's no problem with that. To me, there's no problem because you are living in a capitalist economy. Under a neoliberal capitalism, it further accentuates, but that is a major, major problem, in fact. But the point is, even in this capital accumulation of in this accumulation of capital through the process of city development, what are the processes in which you were able to intervene? But take, for example, when manufacturing was dominating, that's why I'm saying that Riktha would be able to tell you far better than me, because she is like one of the principal, first-hand activists ground at the ground, who's like confronting the nuances of the newer forms of working class coming up in the cities. But the point is, the point to make is that what used to happen earlier, I remember in my young days when I became a student activist, I mean, in a town like Simla, we would mobilize 5,000 people and demonstrate. Look, say, oh, okay, this is my right. Give it to me. For example, free bus ride. For example, housing. For example, labor hostels. In Delhi, can you believe at one point of time, the Lal Jhanda would be able to mobilize some 50,000 workers because you had the cotton mills. Okay, so 10,000 workers working in a cotton mill. Likewise in Mumbai. So, but this was something very international also taking place, and the international was that there was massive shift in the whole process of capitalist production. The capitalist production was not centered in one region, but it went in a very decentralized form. And all these centers, like you had the Modi mills in Delhi, you had all those cotton textile mills where you had lakhs and lakhs of workers who would come, who would intervene, where even your informal sector workers would be coming. For example, housing was a major question. There were other major issues where they would really demand, and they were able to force many state actors, including the city and the provincial actors, that look, this is our right, we want it. That actually capacity to bargain got diminished substantially. A, because of the reason, because you have this transformation in capitalist production system. And B, what also happened, that's the fifth point that I want to make, is, because of this capacity of the working people, that also led to the secularization of the towns, which we normally don't talk about, because if you are walking, if 1 lakh people are walking on the streets, then that also gives you, but I don't, this is not the place, I think, where we are supposed to discuss all that. But at the same time, there's another element to it, and the other element is that another transformation is that apart from this whole process of capitalist production system shifting, and that's very interesting study that internationally, and that also led to, that's what the post-neoliberal period 90s we were also hit by in India, is that how is the accumulation of capital taking place? Earlier, it was through the general processes of city development. Okay, manufacturing, you produce, that's how you generate surplus, the classical capitalist economy we understand. But here, there was a catch. Post-90s in India and post-70s, 80s across the world, there was another form of, in which maximization of profit was taking place. And that was what in political economy we term as use value and exchange value. Now, take, for example, the generation that you come from, Preeti. I'm sure you are post-90s generation, okay, or maybe a little earlier. But the generation that I come from, education was a right. Can you imagine? I've studied in a college, in a school, one of the finest schools in the town, but where it was like literally free, okay? The annual fees was not more than maybe 600 rupees, 700 rupees. So at the same time, your health, so all these things were considered to be as my rights under the constitutional framework, okay? And that's how we have that Washington consensus, whether water is a right or water is a need. So they say, no, it's a need. You shouldn't consider it as a right. So you start moving further. But this led to humongous amount of shift from the capacities of the working people to bargain and the assets that they were able to retain, and what I call the privatization of the utilities. So now city development, which even earlier was for the accumulation of capital, but still had that element of people's participation, now city development was for complete abject privatization that we start witnessing post-90s. Now, what is the driving force? I would say there are two driving forces. One was land, because there were phenomenal changes that were brought in land, and the cities were asked, cities must become engines of growth. That's the new thing we find for the first time in the Indian context. Okay, 12 minutes over. So, so what does that mean? It means that cities must ensure that the land, for example, once you have the shift from manufacturing to services or to other sectors, then there's this huge land that was lying in the cities, like your Modi mills. And all these patches of lands were given at like free to the big industrialists at one point of time. Now, this land was available to you in the city. You could have gone for massive inclusive development. You could have gone for massive inclusive housing projects. But that was not the overarching framework. The overarching framework was, and that continues to dominate even today, that this land must be used as a tool to attract investments. And that is how we find a massive shift taking place in the overall development plans. And that's when I said 2041 Delhi Master Plan. So now real estate, that's the real estate development was the critical drivers. That's one. The second is about the utilities. Now, who designs? Even earlier, if you see, the master plans were never written by the people. There was some sort of intervening aspects. But so I always ask, who designs the cities? It's not the city government. It's not the people. I think that is one of the ways, one of the forms in which our intervention points, our resistances have to be looked at. Delhi, it's the Delhi Development Authority. Mumbai, it's Mumbai Development Authority. Anywhere in the country, including Kerala. The only caveat with Kerala is that the master plan, even the city doesn't plan the master plan, but it comes to the city council for approval. Okay, so they have that little kind of scope to intervene. But nowhere in the country, so master plans are being decided by whom? Now, let me give you one narrative, and that is what I call is the technocentric, capital-intensive technocentric consultants. And that's how, that comes to my sixth element. So what does it mean? It means that the city is more exclusionary in the whole process. Because take, for example, mobility. So you take away the spaces of the pedestrians. I was listening to the previous panel, where people are walking 25 kilometers. But, the average distance that a worker travels in the city is not more than 7 to 8 kilometers, even lesser than that, 6 kilometers. So if the average distance is 6 kilometers, what do you want, Preeti, in a city? You require more pedestrian spaces. You require more cycle spaces. But instead, what do you have? You have large flyovers. You have, for the large guzzlers so that's about mobility. Take, for example, sanitation, for that matter. You could have easily gone for a decentralized, but since it's all technocentric, so the push from the center is to a waste to energy plant for very large number of STP, sewage treatment plants. And always, there's a funny anecdote that I share. Do you know the average distance that a worker in the shit of a worker travels? The average distance that a worker travels is 8 kilometers, 7 to 8. But the average distance that a shit travels in the city is 15 to 16 kilometers. And it doesn't reach the point. That's why you find huge contamination. So, this was completely inverse. It was more for maximization of cap. And that's how you find water utility. I'm told Malviya Nagar, the entire Malviya Nagar area in Delhi is now being taken care of Suez. It's a French company. So, phase-wise, we are witnessing. So I think that's another element where all these processes are taking place and which is leading to huge precarity. The seventh point, if I have another 2 or 3 minutes, is also this huge distress at the countryside. There's a large-scale migration taking place. And earlier, when in these development plans, you had those LIGs, EWS. Now, what you find in the 2041 is the transit-oriented development. Now, what is a TOD? TOD is, I come from Mumbai and I'm traveling to Bhopal. So I would just like some place, to stay. It's for middle and upper middle classes. There's nothing being spoken about the marginalized groups, this huge number of migrants that are coming up. And we've shown in our recent article, the kind of challenges that we are facing. But there's another very interesting study that our panelists must know. And this goes quite contrary to our, and this is what Bezwada and we were discussing. Bezwada said, look, my grandfather had never seen a rupee, so he had always carried shit of others. My father also did the same thing, but at least when he came to the towns and the cities, he could see the currency note, that's fine. I mean, that's one part of the argument. But if you see this whole shift that is taking place even with this form, what you find is the caste-based work continues, because there is huge privatization that is taking place, and you have contractualized it to the people who have actually employed the same kind of people. But the point that I wanted to make is that this goes quite contrary to our understanding. I mean, it is felt that Dalits are the first who should migrate and who should settle in the cities. But there's a study done by one of my friends called, and I consider him to be one of the important scholars in migration. That's I'm forgetting his name, Teltumbe, from IIM Ahmedabad. Okay, and the book is titled, if I am remembering it correctly, is India Moving, and he points out from his huge primary data is the Brahmins. 50% Brahmins settle back in the town. The Dalits go back because Dalits don't have any space in the town. They can't afford that much spaces. So that's how we find slums. More than 40%. Yeah, Chinmay Tumbe. So more than 40% people are living in the slums. So what do we do? I mean, so the resistance is different, but the resistance is bound. And then we have on top of that, this whole artificial intelligence platform. I don't want to speak because Rikta is the one who's going to take care of that. So having said that, I think one of the intervention points, and unlike the conventional points, and this is what I've always been arguing, is treat city as a factory. So not just at the factory grades where we were masters in organizing protests. I think city in itself has become a factory where exploitation is quite inherent in the process of city development. And if that is the case, then I think the working people, and I'm so glad because I saw this forum, the Andhra forum, or what, Telangana Urban Forum. So, we must occupy, and, this whole right to the city, I mean, what David Harvey points out, and Henry Lefebvre also points out, is to engage with the process of city development. It's there where we have to, occupy these spaces where the city makers have to really come forward and have to. And the last word that I want to make, Preeti, I'm so sorry, I'm just taking more time because I think I'm exhausting myself also, is the last part is the whole question of climate change. Because this climate change is definitely impacting, and we've, in this article that we wrote recently, Sandeep and I, we've also pointed out how many working hours. I mean, it's almost 325,000 crore working hours were lost last year. Okay, annually this is going to increase, and the answer from the state actors is, okay, provide some shade, provide some spaces. That's fine, but I think these are systemic questions. So when these are systemic questions, I think the solutions also have to be systemic. I mean, how do we engage with the process of city development? For example, when I wrote the vision document for Leh, I supervised that document. In fact, I was leading the team. We made the city government spend some 50 lakh rupees for the sanitation workers there. So when it's -30 and they're still working there on the streets in Leh, you'll find a place all, with what they call solar passive design, with 4 or 5 washing machines to wash their clothes, take a shower, even when it's -30 degrees. So that I call somewhat democratization of the surplus that gets in the cities. I think those spaces for sanitation workers, for different sections, have to be concretely devised to create slogans, demands, but at the same time, not to miss the point that the city process is the process of city development, where housing is an important question. Why are we not talking about rental housing? As Tumbe points out, people can't stay. So what about rental housing? What about labor hostels? The labor hostels that we have in Simla, and mind you, these labor hostels were designed and built by the British, not by us. And these are pretty good. So these labor hostels where the city governments are meant to provide those spaces. I think we must think beyond our, beyond our conventional warfare methods, and new warfare methods have to be adopted. Because in platform, I'm just occupying Rikta's space. In platform, you can't have a long hartal, because the moment they log you off, you're gone. So what do you do in such a situation? So I think you ought to have very innovative methods. What about collectivization? What about maybe the collective forms in which BD workers in Sholapur are able to construct some 10,000 houses, 10,000 more are coming up. I think we have to think in those spaces, because we are the city makers and we must occupy those spaces. I think I've really taken more time than I was supposed to.
Thank you, Tikender. I mean, right from the history of how city development starts to the changes in, the capitalist accumulation and how that affects city development, the processes of how people have participated or not participated and to climate change. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions coming through, but thank you so much. Next, I did want to invite Rikta Krishnaswamy, the Delhi NCR coordinator of the All India Gig Workers Union. So I first got to know about Rikta as I was looking for news on gig workers in Delhi NCR. And AIGWU has been involved in various campaigns that fight for gig workers. So I'm really excited to listen to Rikta and learn more about the conditions of the workers who in many ways, run our cities and how they organize and resist exploitation. So thank you, Rikta. Over to you.
Thanks for the introduction, Preeti. Good morning to everyone. And I would like to thank your Just Research group at Jindal also for inviting me on behalf of All India Gig Workers Union, and really excited to hear the other panelists speak as well. I'm going to structure my talk a little bit. So I'm going to go through like 4 sections. So one, I think gig work, the term itself is so contentious, and over the years, ever since it started as the sharing economy in the US, then kind of like platform economy, and then gig work. I just wanted to kind of shed a summary and even answer your question about like what does resistance and justice look like in the cities in the beginning. And then also kind of draw from some of our learnings from the present gig workers movement in India, our experience of kind of like, leading some of the struggles in different states. And then we can kind of like open up for questions. I just want to kind of like, flag off that we are affiliated to a central trade union. So we are also connected to the larger workers movement in the country. And a lot of us who started the union in Delhi, we were kids working in the IT sector in 2020 when there were mass layoffs happening in the tech sector. We, had a very ambitious and idealistic kind of like constitution for our union, and realized that gig workers, while they create value for big IT companies, have very, very different challenges than IT employees. Because of our association with the Central Trade Union, CITU, we are also connected to other state-based, company-based unions of platform workers, as well as other workers, right? And that has been a very enriching and, a big learning experience for us when we were thinking of what the on-ground strategies and struggles for gig workers should be. So if you see like in India, like, gig work as a phenomena starts around 2008, 2009, pretty much around the time that it was gathering popularity in the US. And it was marketed with this dream, of creating self-employed micro entrepreneurs and executives who would not be bound by contracts. They would have the freedom and flexibility to work as per their capacity, their wishes, get better earnings. It just sounded too good to be true. And there was this kind of like picture that was painted that they would be working on piece rate, but on multiple digital platforms, so maximizing what they were making. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'm also a designer by profession, so connected to the think tank universe in Delhi, Bangalore, and they used to market it as the future of work. But I think with in the past 1 decade, it's not even been like 10, 15 years of these kinds of platform economies being in place, and it's very, very apparent that the true intention of this form of work and showing it as an alternative form of employment or future of work was to curtail any and all basic rights afforded to a worker under labor laws, whether it is in the US, whether it's in Europe, whether it's here or anywhere else in Asia. And with it, the flexibility that companies get to change their working conditions at will, the pay that the workers get, their working time, without any consent of the workers, or being able to hire or fire them as per their demand and requirements. So when we started the union, there were a lot of debates of what to call it, and we just called it Gig Workers Union because we had to apply for a registration and all of that. And this happened around 2020. We had tried to organize or at least set up meetings with different platform workers, cab riding, food delivery, before 2020, and the COVID pandemic kind of really, really exacerbated and brought to fore the real nature of these companies and this form of work. So gig work actually is not what most of these millions of workers do, right? Like gig work is kind of like you're a part-time musician, working at a restaurant to earn some money on the side. Or you might be kind of like teaching kids for a little bit of a sum. And so that form of work has always existed. And I think post the financial crisis in the US, the unemployment numbers shot up. And companies that should not have had money got bailouts. And this became kind of like the new avenue for them to kind of invest their resources in. So you see a lot of these companies like Uber, TaskRabbit, and all coming up as a response, almost, talking about themselves as some kind of altruistic actors trying to generate employment. But what we've seen, in India is actually much truer in the US, where there have been massive resistance movements against these companies on everything from the tips they earn to the hours people work, to how kind of work is allocated, right? The peculiarity of gig work, and always calling it gig work, and I think at the end of this talk, like we should probably just call them platform workers and not gig workers, because it's always existed. So it's not a novel form of work. It's not the future of work. In fact, it's a very unproductive and exploitative form of work that has existed in India. It still exists in our cities and villages as well. Home-based piece rate work has been done through a contractor in every kind of auxiliary industry, whether it's matchstick production, cashew cleaning, or, sewing like labels onto like a shirt, or, filling small ornaments in boxes, like or beauty products, local beauty products, are all done by women at home at a piece rate. They're managed by a contractor, and it's been happening for like decades, right? And the important part and the commonality, within these historical forms of piece rate, home-based gig work, and the current kind of like collectivization of unorganized workers like delivery personnel and others, is that it was always done to depress wages and reduce the chances of collective bargaining. And that is exactly the reason why there has been so much, lobbying to let this form of work go on unregulated. But at the same time, these should all be jobs. The person who is sitting in their house and, putting matchsticks in a box gets peanuts, gets nothing. Those wages have not increased over decades, right? And this could have been a small, shop floor close to their house where multiple people could go and get proper wages, under proper work timings. And similarly with gig work, earlier when we had started the union, we were like just basing our understanding of this on anecdata from meeting workers. And you're always, you always doubt whether, this phenomena is really what you're seeing it as. But what we realized in 2020 when we started talking to workers to organize them was that the incentive mechanisms on these platforms are such that you have to work 10 to 12 hours. So it doesn't matter if, you're calling it gig work or platform work or freelance work. These are all employees. If somebody has been working with Zomato or Swiggy for like 5 years, since it's open, and they're working in whatever, 0-hour contract arrangement, they're working with the same company for 5 years. Your incentives prevent you from actually working lesser than 8 to 10 hours. And we were just like, why is this called gig work? Like, why are we calling them gig workers? They're not, they're perennial workers who are, associated with this company for very long. And they might be on 1 or 2 other apps. But honestly, if he has to earn that, 500 rupee earning per day with that extra incentive for completing a number of jobs, he is giving that much time to this platform, right? And what has happened is since COVID, that phenomena has only become more and more, widespread across different companies. So, what we are seeing right now after 15 years of these platform companies being in play is that they have taken over the definition of work itself, right? So they're organizing, regulating, they're defining what work means within these platform ecosystems. But they say there's low barrier to entering this kind of workforce. And that's not necessarily true because all the risks, all the costs are being displaced onto the workers who use their belongings, their bikes, their phones, their data, right? The soles of their shoes, paying for small accidents from their own pocket. And it might seem like subordinate self-management, but actually they're controlled far more in a centralized fashion by these platforms. Those algorithms are not coming out of thin air. They're being developed by these companies that, make their role obscure to us, but they're very, very effective in the rationalized management of these informal workers. So when we are thinking of just cities for gig workers or other forms of, so if you're looking at just cities for platform workers, and other kinds of home-based piece workers who are also kind of gig workers, the starting point is to formally recognize them and legally recognize them as employees of a company, whether it's a subsidiary or whether it's a primary or a secondary kind of employer. And not just leave this conversation, around social security, but also what their immediate concerns are, which is income security and working conditions. The funniest thing is you see all these, conversations happening at a national policy level or a state policy level, talking about social security. And I think it's too little too late. If you go and talk to a gig worker today, they'll be like, I'm working 14 hours a day. My back hurts. Our initial talking pitch to any person we meet is like, how's your back? And they're like, oh my God, it kills me. We don't even get to like worker rights and all. We just like ask, that's a informal way in which we ask them like how long they've been working, on an average. And so I want to talk a little bit about like our experiences organizing workers and how it is different from how other organizations might be doing it, right? We started this union not because, we were gig workers, because we were all IT workers. The lack of IT unions in the industry leads to such exploitative working conditions. And it's not actually, I think, post-COVID, it's being spoken about a lot more, right? Like these were people, who we didn't like, read Marx or Lenin. We were just like, we're working 14, 16 hours a day. And then we started reading Marx and Lenin. And, our experiences as these very, very skilled white-collar workers in the IT industry and our frustrations with the lack of any kind of regulations, whether it was our working hours, our pay, or even how we are fired from the company, right? If you look at voluntary resignations, that was kind of the starting point. And then we kind of like realize that it's the same IT companies that actually manage and regulate or lobby for the, lack of regulations of that gig workers face. So we've always, tried to kind of like unite workers that are from very disparate kind of class positions and, backgrounds while we were organizing gig workers. And we were also very, very certain that, we have to build that kind of like leadership from within the gig workers so that we are not, constantly speaking on their behalf. And that's kind of, why we've always, even if it's like the smallest hint of trouble, like we try to organize them, we try to extend that struggle beyond kind of a log out protest, and we say like, let's get the labor departments involved. Let's, go and talk to kind of like the labor inspector in this area, so that even though these workers might not see themselves as employees, they see themselves as executives and partners and whatever terms are thrown. And that kind of like rose-colored glasses, of course, has broken because of what the companies have been doing. We we make it a point that nothing is left at just kind of like collective bargaining with the company level, because the power structures are so imbalanced that they can just shut off your ID, throw you out of the platform. So to make sure that those who should actually be involved in the process of protecting gig workers actually identify their power as, a unit of collective bargaining, and to also show them why that's important. Because, like when we go to labor department meetings, we go to, we file complaints and all. And the first thing we hear is like, oh, central government has not like created any laws or rules, and you guys have already made a union. So we said, well, the exploitation is happening for 10 years. So here we are, and so what we have been doing is to actually use existing labor laws, So you're a Zepto worker, you're an Amazon worker, you're tied to a delivery, location. You don't have any other workplaces. You're not working on 15 billion apps. You're not a gig worker, you're an employee. So we just started actually treating gig workers as employees of that platform, without getting into the nitty-gritties of algorithmic management and who's part-time and all, because the existing labor laws have been written over like 100 years and finessed. And, like, this is my opening speech, like Shops and Establishment Acts, like protect like circus clowns who work, seasonally. Why can't it protect, the delivery workers or the logistic workers of these warehouses? So we've, through our struggles, through kind of like on ground raising of these issues, and not just kind of like very, very, top level intellectualizing, have come to this position that we want on a case-to-case basis. This is not a homogeneous group. There exists a lot of variations within the types of gig works, within the kinds of, services, professionals, delivery workers, logistics workers, cab drivers. So we want the existing law to be applied wherever possible. And and we have a system of labor departments, we have a system of tribunals, we have a system of courts. We want to set precedents there, rather than constantly asking for a new law, which will take ages, and that has been kind of one of the ways in which going through a very rank and file traditional union organizing, it has kind of like really simplified and cut a lot of the faff that exists around how this needs to be regulated, give them the recognition of employees, apply whichever law, whether it's industrial disputes, whether it's factories or shops and establishment, just apply it where it is applicable on a case basis, instead of painting them all with a brush stroke. 15 minutes is very less to cover this, but I can, answer some of the questions around the actual working conditions and those kinds of things in the question and answer session. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rikta. You didn't disappoint. You were speaking about, because like I said, in your session, I was really looking forward to think about how resistance and organizing happens. It kind of ties to what Tikender was saying about how decentralized our workers are, and yet how do we organize them, especially the case, the decentralization of workers is so evident in the case of platform
I mean, if you afford me just 1 minute to respond to that, it's not different organizing gig workers. Like, these companies, they recruit from specific colonies through caste-based networks, sweepers, housekeeping workers for urban company. They'll go to a Dalit basti, they'll catch like 11th, 12th grade kids and say, earn some supplementary income. So, once you actually start talking to the workers, you understand the operational, policies and strategies of these companies. All your workers come from a specific area and they're assigned to hubs. So like where I live in Kalkaji in Delhi, for example, is a joint hub between CR Park, GK, Kalkaji for urban company workers. So the workers know the ins and out. They are the best, so it might not be like a shop front, but there are addas where they sit, especially male workers. It's very easy to find them. With women, we have to be a lot more creative. But yeah, like a lot of people ask, there's new forms of organizing. And we are like, nope, it's that same old go to the residential areas where they're recruited from, or go to the working areas where they hang out in between jobs. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So now we go to our third and final panelist. So we invite Dr. Khalid Wasim Hassan, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Politics and Governance in the School of Social Sciences at the Central University of Kashmir. His research focuses on public spaces, gender, and marginalized communities in conflict zone. I mean, this brings truly like an example of, we were looking forward to hear his work on smart cities, public spaces, and exclusion in Srinagar as an example of all the things that we have talked about right now. Over to you, Khalid.
Thank you, Preeti. Am I audible? I was working on public spaces for some time, trying to look at how the public spaces change, particularly when there is violence around and there is political conflict is around, and how the spaces also become gendered spaces. And then what is the negotiation that happens? How the people actually create alternative spaces where they can work or where they can talk or where they can have a dialogue. Are there alternative spaces? And Srinagar has been one of the important cities historically, a center of power, and there have been a lot of things happening around Srinagar for the last few years. But I was trying to look at, continuing my research, I was trying to look at what is happening in a recent trend. That in the name of development, now all over India, the concept of smart city is being brought forward. And Srinagar is chosen as one of the cities. There is a huge project of 2 lakh crores all over India that 100 cities will be turned into smart cities, and Srinagar is one of the cities. There is this notion in the literature that's coming in urban planning that smart city is the answer to what's happening because of urbanization. Urbanization has the faster rate, and there's a challenge to sustainable development, and hence, yes, we have to give the smarter ways to deal with it, and hence we have a smarter city. But the question is this: the way development became a discourse from the West, and it was taken from global South. Everyone, followed it without looking into socio-political history, without looking into what we need. Is same thing happening in this notion of smart city? Is smart city also turning into not a concept but a discourse in itself? If you look at the literature on smart city, there are varied ways. Even the terminologies used by scholars vary. Some people do call it digital city, technocratic city, or smart city, or a promising, a future city. But then, looking at this literature, most of the focus is on that we need to. They say that we need to incorporate information technology in the urban spaces because we need to achieve higher quality of life, and we need to take care of sustainable development. We need to take care of environment also, and hence we should have a smart governance of the city. Yes, these are very important things if you have to manage the urban spaces. But what is lacking there, that the way they talk about sustainability in terms of the environment, they do not talk about social sustainability. the question that is actually important, for this whole notion of smart city, that is social inclusion also part of this whole conceptualization? Is eradication of poverty also part of it? Is reduction of inequalities part of it? Do smart cities also think about that it should come up with the participatory decision making, or what Mr. Tigender Panwa was saying, that technocrats become whole and sole responsible for all this? And then this experiment is being done in now being done in India also. And if you look at the policy document that has come, and they have put it on the websites of about smart cities, all over 100 cities, and these are some important parts. Yes, we will focus on ICT, we will bring changes, there will be infrastructure, and there will be beautification of the cities. These are some important parts. One which is at a superficial level, that it's not inclusive in terms of the India, is that how many people are going to benefit out of it. And I'm talking in terms of the numbers. It's just 8% of India's total population, and that's actually 22% of the urban population that's going to be, if at all it becomes successful in coming few years, in a decade, then only 22% of the urban population is going to benefit from it. But apart from this, but wherever these cities are being created, or are being planned, are these inclusive? What's happening to the marginalized sections? What's happening to the marginalized communities? And the way it stresses on ICT, data, technology, the question is technology neutral? Can we see technology also as a very objective? Is everyone having equally access to technology? Now, if you look at Srinagar, as I told you, that it has been important, and it's considered as one of the oldest cities in Asia, and about many times had been a power of center of power for many regimes. Right now, it has 13.5 lakh, population, separated by around 294 square kilometers. It is divided into various parts. Major divisions are east and west, but then the upper towns, downtown, colonies. It has been designated under a municipal corporation in different parts. The main attraction is that how the nine old bridges actually connect two sides of the city along the Jhelum River. And on the banks of the Jhelum River is the older town also, which we call as Shahri Khas, or the downtown, which has been also in news for last 3 decades, because it has been considered as a part of very violent space. But then after this, what from post 2019, smart city also became as a symbol of a development, which the state is trying to project, that the changes that have been brought in Kashmir, one of the major changes is smart city. This has been given to the people. So there is a politics what is not happening in other 99 cities. Srinagar stands out because there's a lot of projection that this is going to change. And this is also being connected to the tourism, that tourists come, there is a smart city, and this is an attraction for them. And there is also this whole notion of politics of tourism. Actually, only 6% of the population of J&K is associated with tourism, but it's being projected as if the whole J&K is dependent on tourism. Major sector of economy still is agriculture, then are the services, then are the small businesses, and then is the tourism. Uh, but this is that's why I'm saying that how the public spaces are being connected to the larger politics also. Now, what I was looking at, some of the marginalized communities which are, still living in Srinagar, who are marginalized not only in terms of the class, but there is also, that social caste. There is a whole new literature that's coming up, touching up, which is actually caste among the Muslims, which a lot of people denied for a longer period of time. But it's a fact, and Kashmir is no exception. The caste works, and the people who are associated with different occupations are being, they experience discrimination in everyday life. And some of the communities, like the sweeper community, which in Kashmiri they are in a very derogatory sense called as batals. Then there is a Hanji community, fisherman community, who live either on the banks of within the Dal Lake or the banks of Jhelum River. Then there are also street vendors who are also, in terms of the class, are low, and in terms of the social caste, are also considered as lower in hierarchy. Then we have also, people who are differently abled, or people, or the women. Women are also part of, the marginalized sections here. But now, if you look at, the emergence of smart city, one important thing that happened was that wherever there are colonies or ghettos, they have to be removed. There need to be an eviction, because the trend, the message is that Srinagar city, there will be, a technocratic intervention. There will be cameras, there will be widening of roads, there will be infrastructure, but also there is also so much stress on beautification. So certain colonies where actually the called lower social castes people live, particularly Batal community, they are being seen as not good for this beautification of the city. So there is, they have. I was talking during my field work to them. I could see that the eviction notices that they have gotten without any, and they have actually the papers under which was a Roshni Act, where the land was given to certain people from the state. Land was given, and it was under the act, it was legally given to them, that in future, in case they are not, it's not livable place, then they will be shifted and given, a compensation will be given. It was under the Roshni Act. But after 2019, a lot of laws were changed, and this was one of the laws that was hit recently in 2022, that Roshni Act is illegal, and we need to get back state land. We need to evict people who are living there. So this was one of the communities that got affected, because smart city needs a beautification. Smart cities need not these hurdles. There is a need of widening of roads, and this community who is dealing with either, their occupation is either scavenging, or they are sweepers, or they work in Srinagar Municipal Corporation, and the way they are being seen as, as a different, as other, that became the problem. Similarly, looking at the Hanji community, particularly women in Hanji community, these are the fisher women who sell fish. Men are this in a collaboration between men and women, that men catch from from Dal Lake or Jhelum, they catch the fish, and the women are the ones who go to the market. But there was no designated space for, a market for as a fish market, as we have in other cities. I have seen in Chennai, I have seen in Bangalore, that we have designated spaces, but in Srinagar there was no such space. So these women will go to the different parts of the city, and early morning at 5 o'clock, and they used to sell fish. And there was a totally different ways of, it developed a public space where people will interact. There was a different kind of interaction that was happening in these public spaces. Now, under this smart city provision, Srinagar Municipal Committee has, banned any street vendor, including fisherwomen, to sit on the street, or to sit and to occupy any spaces within the limits of Srinagar and sell the fish. So it not only affects the livelihood, because fishing is not only the means of livelihood; it's a part of culture. They live through it. It's a part of their life. They identify themselves with this occupation. So this notion of, we will give them something else, we will compensate them, let them leave the fishing. So they don't ask. What's lacking is understanding of the cultural aspect of these livelihoods, how these are connected. So smart city is actually becoming a hurdle not only for the livelihood, it's also actually a threat to the culture of a particular community. Similarly, if you look at, there are certain organizations which work for differently abled persons. So I was talking to the group there in my focus group discussion, and one of the students who is physically disabled was talking to me, and he said, I quote, "Although roads were narrow first, but I could move on my wheelchair in the market at Residency Road in Lal Chowk. But now with these new elevated pavements and wider roads, neither I am able to move nor cross the road. I have to take my friend along, who takes me on his back. I'm happy to have such a friend, but at the same time, I feel humiliated. So what's happening here that the spaces, there is a shrinking of the spaces for, on the one side physically you can see there is a widening of roads. It will give a look that no one will accept my statement that I'm saying there are shrinking of spaces. People will show me that how the widening of roads is happening, how the transport is moving freely. But when I'm saying shrinking of spaces, I'm talking about the spaces which were lived spaces where interaction used to happen, where people will go, where people will have a dialogue, where people can sell their products. And there has been actually the markets which were either opening on Sundays or some particular weekday for street vendors, or those have been closed down. There has been eviction, and they have been promised that yes, the separate market spaces will be opened, but outside the limits of Srinagar, which they find very amusing, because the market depends on people around on daily basis. It cannot be, it's not kind of an. And what's happening actually in Srinagar, if you visit, if you come to Srinagar in a recent times, you will see the different structures coming up, and it's a push towards some different agendas in terms of infrastructure. Big malls are coming up, theaters are being promoted, small shops are being reduced. There is a takeover of big names, in terms of the way it used to happen in Delhi. The big names will come, and in terms of even the small as small as grocery or vegetables. So you cannot find now in the Lal Chowk or main city centers the people selling products or on the pavements or on the small shops. So there is, in the name of smart city, the structure of the city is being changed. City is not just a physical infrastructure. The concept of city is very cultural. There is a history associated with the city, and now the resilience is being, there is a resilience being shown by these marginalized communities, as James Scott calls it, as the weapons of the weak, not openly, because I'm sure that in a space like Kashmir, uh, we are not able to talk now, if in case we have to show some resilience. But there are ways in which marginalized communities do show their resilience in a different, very tacit manner, where the particularly Hanji community, they say that our fisherwomen, if they are not allowed to go to these markets on the banks of Boulevard Road, which is actually a major attraction for the tourists, they openly sell fish there, even if the police sometimes comes, takes away. But they should, because this is our livelihood. Why should we be ashamed in this beautiful state to show what we are doing? Similarly, Wadal community, they are saying that they have gone to the court of law against this eviction, and also they have started twice the bulldozers came there, to remove them, but there was a protest and there was a dharna. Which they did along with their man and woman together. So there are ways, and then there are masjid committees, small masjid communities in these localities, which are actually helping street vendors who are without livelihood, because their livelihood depends on daily selling of these small products. Now the masjid committees are helping them, trying to convince people in the local muhallas that they should, even if they are go to their home and buy these products, they should promote, they should keep their economy live. So I will stop here.
Thank you so much to all the three panelists. We do have some questions. So I will start with in the order of how we went with the panels. So again, I had some questions, but one of the most common questions that seems to be coming from the audience is the process of participation in city design itself, as to what might have caused the lack of participation. Is it a lack of disinterest, or are there conditions that caused that disinterest? And to add to what is there, do you have any examples within India or otherwhere where there has been at least some kind of participation in city design at all?
Okay, thank you. But before that, I mean, I'm really glad that Khalid Saab was able to. I wanted to speak about smart cities, but then I realized I myself got exhausted. But I'm so happy that Khalid Saab spoke about smart cities. To me, in fact, I mean, just to say, uh, uh, smart cities are actually the highest exclusionary form of urban development, to be very precise, you know. And you see, the entire structure is, I mean, I just wanted to comment on that, is laid in a way where even the trivial forms of democratic decentralization have been sent to the mortuary. That's what, and you know, because I wanted to comment on that, but you know, that's why I'm really happy Khalisa brought it. So I am also one of the persons to review the 74th constitutional amendment. That also will answer your question, okay, Preeti? So we know what the 74th constitutional amendment is, and the person who wrote this amendment is K.C. Sivaramakrishnan. He's no more with us. So so we reviewed that 74th amendment. He was the chair. I was also one of the members. And then, of course, we brought in lots of interesting data, lots of interesting intervention points. Well, no one listened to us. I mean, though it was a very high-powered committee, and because you know, when 74th Amendment was written, migration was not an issue. So migration is not even incorporated into the spirit of the 74th Constitutional Amendment. Okay. So, but then when smart cities came, I mean, why I wonder. So he used to say, he said, Tikender, do you know what a smart city is? I said, sir, you are my guru. I mean, you tell me what is a smart city. Then he said, Tikender, smart city is like writing an obituary of the 74th Constitutional Amendment. So you know, your board of directors, SPVs, and all that shit that we are witnessing. And it was supposed to be the flagship program, lighthouses. Now, you know, not even bulbs are glowing in those smart cities. Okay, complete failure. Anyway, so the point is, I think when you're speaking about people's participation, I think this is a complete metamorphosis that has happened. The structure is such that the process doesn't want people's participation at all. That's why it's more technocentric, you know. When I joined the office, I'm just another very funny anecdote. So we had the city sanitation plan being drawn up. And I don't want to name the company because, you know, that is not prudent here to name a company. But they said, you don't worry, you just pass it. I said, what the hell is this? Why do you want us to pass it? Because we'll get you the investments. And, you know, it's the worst kind of smart city sanitation plan as I've ever seen. I mean, it didn't even match the data. I mean, not realistic. Didn't even know where the toilets in the town are. But still, they were the international consultants. And they said, we'll get you the investments. And in fact, that is the story of each and every. And there was no process of people's participation. So what is the given process, if you ask me? I go back to the 74th Constitutional Amendment. Actually, what needs to be strengthened is the effective implementation of the 74th Amendment, because it talks about ward sabhas. It talks about ward committees. Tell me one place in the country where this is happening. I'm not sure if it's happening. Of course, it is happening in Kerala. It is happening somewhat in Bengal, I'm told. But still, if you see the spirit of the 74th Amendment, it says that the plan must be the first element that should have been transferred, because there are 3 Fs that were supposed to be transferred to the cities: functions, functionaries, and finances. So the first function under the 12th schedule is that of the 18 items, the first is city planning. Nowhere in the country has city planning been transferred. So the city plan, and if you see the process of city planning, it should have been very bottom up, which means your ward sabhas, ward committees. Now you can understand Delhi ward sabha would be like the size of a municipality in a mountain town. So that ward sabha would also not be commensurate to the requirement, to the needs. So what do you do? So then you should have neighborhood. So, you know, that further extension of the ward sabhas. But that is the only way. To me, the answer to over-centralization of finances, of powers, is democratic decentralization. Decentralization, but highly democratic. And if it's no, means no. I mean, if people say, no, we don't want this. I think that is where, so that processes we must revisit. And I'm seeing in Karnataka, there are like lots of processes going on by different groups. Janagraha is one, and there are many others who are arguing for this decentralization process. Lastly, in this, another thing, because I'm also part of the Kerala Urban Commission. Now, we are supposed to submit a report. I mean, this commission is there for a year. And so what Kerala wants is kind of people's plan model, which they experimented with the rural Kerala in the urban format. And there, I'm heading, like, there are 12, 13 subgroups. I don't remember. I think 13 subgroups. I'm heading one of these subgroups. In fact, that is the governance subgroup in the structure, but it's a very high-powered committee. We spoke to the chief minister. We spoke to the chief secretary. We said, please don't let it be, another commission. Although it's a very high-powered commission, the additional chief secretary happens to be the commission to this secretary to the commission. They said, no, we want to own it because we want to implement it. So perhaps that could be one of the experiments where the further enhancement or the further strengthening of the 74th constitutional amendment, you would see where we are trying to get back to many people around the country and even around the world, bringing in best practices. But Kerala is a different model, I would say, because there even the people demand that. I mean, if you're digging a lane, they said, who the hell has given you this right? If you've not asked us, I think systematically that has been taken over. Honestly speaking, where people still, and of course with this new narrative in the country that, look, ruler ruled state. I am the ruler. That's why you are surviving. I mean, to break that. And I think one of the ways to break that is in this in this whole question of municipal governance, which is so essential, I would say.
Thank you so much, Tikender. To Riktha, I think there's one clarification question that an audience is
but just Preeti, one more thing. I mean, the smart city, because I'm really obfuscated with that. There's one overwhelming comment that I've been making, and Khalid Saab, pick any smart city in the country, and you would find these towns and cities which had never flooded in the history of evolution. After smart cities, they have been flooded. I learned Srinagar was flooded recently because what they've done is, because of this huge pent-up demand for creating infrastructures, they didn't even give a damn to the water contouring, to the water channels that you had in the city. So you started constructing those. Apart from that exclusionary stuff, that the design is inherently faulty of the smart cities. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Riktha, there's a clarification question, and then I wanted to ask another question as well. So the clarification question is, they wanted, one of the audience wanted you to differentiate between gig economy, defined by its workforce participation, and from platform businesses such as marketplaces, such as Amazon. So I'm assuming that's not what you meant, but yeah. So first is for you to differentiate that. And the other question that I will leave you with is also the question of gender. Again, when we think about workers, typically I think, the imagination is of a man, but in gig workers, or platform workers, we see a lot of women also participating. What are the specific challenges and issues that gender operates as well? So the first one, yeah, continue.
So first one is, sorry, a clarification on what exactly? Or can you just point me to whose question this is?
The question answer the part where they actually wanted to differentiate between gigs and marketplaces like Amazon. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So see, marketplaces like Amazon might have small retailers and all. We don't consider that within the aegis of gig work as it is colloquially known. But there are logistics delivery workers, right? So there are warehouses. It all operates on a hub and spoke model. So even the people who come and deliver your goods from an Amazon warehouse might be a third party, like a delivery or Amazon's own workforce. They're all, again, managed through an app. The rate of payment might differ. Like you might be getting paid like per bag of delivery for one round, or it could be per delivery, like 15 rupees. Okay. I mean, the delivery rates more or less, whether it's Amazon, Zepto, Blinkit, Swiggy, Zomato, have, because of just like the sheer force of competition, like it's normalized. So nobody's earning more than 10, 15 rupees per delivery. So in the end, it adds up to literally nothing. Yeah. And the marketplace retailers are, of course, small businesses or individuals. So those are not counted within. Maybe there might be, I don't know, but not currently within the aegis of the union. And your second question around organizing women, right? And I mean, it's been my experience, at least working in Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, that women gig workers are far more militant than male gig workers. And I think it's precisely because of the challenges that they have to overcome to be a part of the workforce, right? And gig work like provides far fewer opportunities for women. So, the same kind of gendering of women's labor that you see in traditional employment or, other kinds of employment. So it's either housekeeping work, being like a caretaker for children. So now there are a lot of like these small companies that are coming up that just staff kind of, caregivers, whether it's for kids, for elderly, or like, beauty salon kind of services, right? And the barrier for them entering this kind of like workforce is obviously much more higher than men, because, I think we forget that most of these kinds of, platform companies do take a specific cut of the money that they're earning. They don't have any contracts. They also have to buy the products in some cases, or pay for their travel in other cases. So when there is an issue of pay or, job loss, so, they ultimately get double the blame, right? Because they've taken money from someone. That investment that they've made to work in the platform company also comes at a cost. So, so it's no surprise that they're actually like the first people to, organize protest or want to kind of like demand what is rightfully theirs. With men, there's always other forms of employment they can fall back to, or, like, so that kind of just the ability of getting other opportunities might itself reduce their, inclination or want to actually fight the long fight. But in the case of women, it's not so, because there are absolutely no other avenues for them. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And coming to Khalid, and I think the question I have for Khalid can be also answered by everybody, because we were talking about, organizing workers in their spaces, right? And so I was kind of curious, since you study public spaces as well, how does the notion of the smart city kill those spaces where communities can? So Tikendra did talk about the decentralization, where people are no longer in one space, but they have to be over many places. So do you see that happening as it is right now, happening in the smart city of Srinagar? The depletion of community spaces, which is essential for even organizing itself. Or yeah.
Yes, that's what is happening for last 1 decade here in Srinagar. There is also kind of in itself. So it does what I call is as shrinking of these public spaces, where there used to be the social interaction among the community members. In case of any social issues or economic challenge, the very active social groups used to come together. The city provided such a space for them that these kind of social spaces happened. So that sense of community depended on the quality of the public space which they used to experience. So there was a clear cut, interaction of this, how the sense of belonging, and the sense that every member of the society matters to each other. that kind of an interaction was happening, and that's how now it's kind of an, as one of the participants in the group also has asked me, that there is a lot of people, a lot of lands are being converted into infrastructures, which Mr. Panwar also pointed out what's happening in Srinagar. So there was partly agricultural lands around Srinagar also, within the Srinagar city also, and those agricultural lands are being also converted into big infrastructure. People are buying lands, there are new malls coming up, there are new buildings coming up, and the traditional spaces that used to be the space of interaction, that have been reduced. So there is also a way, if possible, any kind of a possible resistance or resilience against this whole development that's happening, that is being actually diluted. There is less interaction now, or possibly there are no platforms, there are no public spheres, not in Habermasian sense, but in Kashmir traditionally there used to be different kinds of platforms, very traditional public spheres, where people will interact, they share what their problems, their issues. Even during the last 35 years, when there was political violence around, people were meeting either on the hammams of the mosques, or shoplifts, or on the pavements, where they will discuss the problems which they face and experience, and then there will be a plan, and where how they will resist, or how they will confront. But right now it's actually the construction is happening in such a way, people are being it's a deliberate attempt that the nature of the public space is being changed. It helps a particular class and a group, but not everyone. The level, the quality of, and the quality of the social interaction among the people is reduced.
Thank you. I'm curious about if Rikta and Takinder, would you also respond to that? Like, how has city design, come in the way of, these spaces of organizing? Or is it always like the city is a factory and our neighborhoods are our spaces of organizing?
I mean, like from my experience, like you will, if there is a protest, it's happening outside a shop front. It's not necessarily happening outside the company's HQ all the time, or it'll happen at a smaller office and things like that. And the first thing that happens is the managers will fake some story about workers threatening their employees, call the police, and try to, scurry them away from the location. And I remember this one incident where, like, in 2020, when they actually fired their whole fleet managers, Swiggy had like little offices everywhere, and they fired the entire fleet manager kind of like cadre and just had one guy looking at Delhi NCR. So Noida, Ghaziabad, all of that, you know. And so they were like, who is this manager? We don't know. The rates had dropped from 35 rupees to 15 rupees per delivery overnight. And so they said, okay, like there's a dark kitchen that is owned by Swiggy, and I've sometimes seen some manager looking dude coming there. So they went and just kind of like took over the dark kitchen, and said, we are not going to move away from here till the person who is currently responsible for our working conditions come here. And, in these kinds of cases, like always, like a police inspector from a local thana will come. And so our argument is always like, where do we go protest if not in these spaces where we don't even know who's managing our operations anymore, let alone, so, but the interesting thing is, like, I also work with a youth organization, and I wanted to add a little, on-ground experience of what Tikendra was talking about, this kind of like absolute like lack of power in the municipalities. And some of these things like ward sabhas and mohalla sabhas, at least in Delhi, like Aam Aadmi Party had said that they would do it as part of their kind of like governance initiatives, but there is like almost like a consciousness shift, because we constantly struggle on like local issues around sewerage connections, pipes being too old, flooding, lack of like spaces for children in working class neighborhoods. And I mean, Hausrani is not, all that land around Hausrani was once upon a time Hausrani, right? And so not having like basic amenities. And often it's just put back to us. Like, so, we organized all these children from schools. We went to the MLA's office and we said, you have this MLA fund, you get a couple of crores for community development. We want a library space. He's like, find me the land. And so what we have realized is that when we do these kinds of campaigns closer to a certain election, so like a MCD election or a Vidhan Sabha election, then suddenly like you'll have all these ward sabhas happening only because their own, party cadre are signing our petition saying, no, this is a big problem. Sanitation is a huge issue. And when you look at these ward sabhas that they do in our areas, I used to live in Malviya Nagar, it is always like the oldest people in the community who will just sit there for like a very performative kind of like meeting. There's absolutely no discussion, raising of issues. So in their heads, they're actually checking all those boxes that we're doing, like, participatory planning, and we're doing ward sabhas and all of these things. But actually, it's infantilizing the citizens and taxpayers of those communities. Yeah. Over to you, Tikender.
So what's the exact question, Preeti? I mean,
No, I was just asking about how has city design or the absence of public spaces. You talked about Gurgaon. I always feel it's just malls and large high rises, and there is no public space itself, right? So the lack of public spaces, how does that affect community building or participation or resistance or organizing or any of those things that we've been talking about?
okay. So I would say it is quite inherent to the design of the city post 90s. And the new avant-garde of post neoliberalized township is to create these monstrous buildings where you try to explain to the common person that, hey, we give you a damn. I mean, whatever you do, but we are the ones who will be dictating terms. So that's one basic consciousness that is being created. Having said that, that also gives you, but at the same time, this whole process of urbanization is also pushing millions and millions into abject poverty, into precarity, but also into subsistence. I mean, it's literally subsistence that you're looking at. So, what we were doing, like if I share two, experiences when I just joined the people's movement it was in late 90s, okay, 97, 98. And the two major strikes that I was part of and led, one was in the hydropower project where, we were able to just halt the hydropower for almost 6 months. I mean, no construction was taking place. But we could sustain that because we went in amongst the peasantry, so in Rampur area. So, and that's how we were able to. In Simla, there was another strike where, but that was in the town hospitality industry. 9 months, the hotels and restaurants were shut, okay, in Simla. But then again, we went back to the people. How did we survive? Can we imagine such things happening now? I would say it's difficult. Those spaces are now shrunk. So, you will have to, but then in the current spaces, how could we get elected? I mean, I won through a direct election. Everyone knew my political affiliation. So, I think, so what Rikta was pointing out, I think the whole process of this city building and the loss to urban commons, I would put it like that, it's massive. I think what needs to be done is this dialectical relationship between urban commons and the precarity of the workers has to be brought to the fore. And at any cost, we should not lose an attempt where we are able to forthrightly build our case or, build movements on that, because there where the people are going to come. I mean, foremost, they're going to come. We've seen on the issue of playgrounds, because the inherent design is they don't want a playground, they want a stadium. The inherent design is they don't want a primary health center, they want a multi-speciality hospital. That's exactly what has happened in Gurgaon. But there are people, okay? There are people living in millions and millions, and they are bound to come. So I think it's quite complex, but at the same time, of course, not to refer to Kerala, where they've experimented far beyond. They've gone through Kodamshree, where they've gone into organic vegetables, because there are another sections of people, for example, your apartments. They don't even want people to enter, okay? You have the new middle class. Let's not even talk about them. But, they are also part and parcel. So how do you really engage with them? I think urban commons is a important area. So, and what we are doing right now, Simla, we are having a meeting after this. I may not be able to attend that. But so Simla is all on the climate lens now. So they have mapped one ward which is extremely vulnerable from fire hazard. And you can't imagine the kind of people who are participating in these meetings. And all this is done by us, progressive people, right from your community leaders, from your working class, because it's a cake pen, okay? And we are trying to explain, look, we want good fire hydrants, and the hydrants that were constructed, that were laid by the British, you occupied them. So if there's a fire, the entire colony the workers would be the first one, okay? So that's what is being discussed. Likewise, your shops would be ruined. So you have the shop owners, you have the hotel owners, you have all sorts of people, workers, street vendors, all are coming this meeting this afternoon. So I think, yeah, it's complex, but you have to be there and continuously engage. But I think the inherent design also needs to be questioned. And the inherent design is quite anti-urban commons, anti-people, highly exclusionary in the process. Yeah.
Thank you all. On the note of urban commons, I think we can draw a close to our panel. Thank you so much for all three of you, and for bringing us a very critical lens, as well as thinking about strategies of organizing and what we need to do the way forward. So thank you so much for that. I'll now pass on to Chetan. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a great discussion that happened the last 2-3 hours. Thank you so much. And it is a pleasure to listen to all the resource persons and discussants. I'm very thankful to Amit, Anuj, Tikender, Rikta, Khalid, and our discussants, Namesh and Preeti. It has broadened the horizon of one's understanding of the meaning of justice, resistance, and development in the changing social context and social justice paradigm. So this is one of the unique contributions which directly represents the voice of the voiceless, who are the everyday victims of displacement, violence, discriminations, and of course, prejudices. I'm sure both the sessions on evictions, injustice in urban development, and development and justice, development or injustice, have contributed a lot to the understanding of socioeconomic mobility, changes, workers' rights, and their transformations. So on behalf of JGU, Ideas, Dean Ideas, and our constellation, Justice, Urban Space, and Technology, I'm very thankful to all the resource persons for their contribution and their precious time for engaging us in these insightful discussions. I extend my gratitude to our team members, JGU IT and Kirti, for all of their supports and participation. So thank you so much for your presence. It was really insightful and very delightful for us, all of us. Thank you so much.
It was wonderful to be here. And
Thank you so much. This was a really lovely discussion. We're so happy that this was the first event of JUST. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.